Hi, my name's Chris Baker, and in case you haven't heard me say it before, I've had the privilege of working on 5 Spider-Man games, but now I'm just a fan, and I'm loving it. But I still take my Spidey games really seriously, and I'm really happy to see that Insomniac released at least a little bit of new footage during D23 over the weekend. It's only about 25 seconds of footage that I didn't recognize seeing from previous trailers, plus 4 new pieces of concept art. But even though this doesn't seem like a whole lot, there's actually quite a bit to dig into here, so let's do that. First of all, we did learn from the 2016 trailer that Spider-Man will be chasing down cars again, which is kind of a staple for his open world games, but this particular sequence is brand new. Notice how there's no mask on this guy that Spider-Man ejected from the car. I believe this is the first guy that's just like a normal thug that we're seeing him beat up. He's not one of Mr. Negative's inner demons. Next, we just got some cool new combat going on. Check out how when he gets to 7 hits, it becomes an amazing combo. I think that's a new thing. But this is the best part right here. Pretty sure he just used the web trap that we saw in the last trailer and in Spider-Man Homecoming on an actual person. And finally, we've got some great new web swinging stuff going on. There's one part in particular that I'd like to call out. Once Spider-Man passes a sign that may or may not be Mary Jane Watson, remember the last time we looked at that? He casts this web right here. Now notice where it lands specifically. Okay, let's keep going. Now check out how the web kind of bends around the building. And you can't really see that happening per se, but as soon as Spider-Man kind of swings upward, that is because the web is actually wrapping around the building. So when Insomniac is talking about the physics-based web swinging that's going on, this is exactly what they're talking about, and it's awesome. Most of the rest of the video is people like my good friend Brian Intihar talking about how great the game's going to be. Hello again, Brian. I actually think it's funny how everything on the screen is totally blurred so that we can't read it for spoilers. And this particular screen caught my attention. Does that say Mark Waid on the graffiti? If you don't know, Mark Waid is one of the greatest comic book writers of all time. He's written some Spider-Man, he's not necessarily known for it, but he's certainly worthy of being an Easter egg. Which brings us to what I would consider the most interesting part of this whole thing, the 4 pieces of concept art. Let's analyze them one by one from the least interesting piece to the most interesting piece. First up, we have some chaos at what appears to be the New York Stock Exchange. One note, I find it very cool that there are so many notable buildings that you can recognize in this game. A lot of people don't realize that you actually have to pay licensing fees to use notable buildings in games. So the fact that I've seen buildings like this one, the Chrysler Building, One World Trade Center, that shows that Sony really believes in this game and is putting a lot of money toward it. But as for the actual image here, the first time I saw it, I didn't even notice that Mr. Negative and 2 inner demons were there because there's just so much else going on. But they're there. I'd like to think that Martin Lee sat back one night and watched The Dark Knight Rises, which inspired his dark half to go emulate the action of Bane in that movie. Next thing you know, he'll be blowing up a football field. Okay, aside from the general chaos, there's not much else here. I did take a close look at the ticker there to the right. I wonder if ACT is a reference to Activision, who of course made a ton of Spider-Man games in the past, all 5 of them that I worked on. Activision Blizzard is actually ATVI, but I could see ACT being kind of a nod there. It probably isn't though, it's probably just letters. Next up we have Spider-Man fighting who appears to be the Kingpin, Wilson Fisk. Coming out of E3, we do know that Kingpin is apprehended by Spider-Man early in the game, so perhaps this is that scene. It certainly looks like a place where he would live. There's a lot of fine art on the walls that is now not so fine. It just looks classy in general, or at least used to before it was all shot up. If you look through the windows, you can actually see a police helicopter, so I'm wondering if they're responding or if they were already on their way. Actually, what stands out the most to me here, though, is the fact that Kingpin isn't really that fat. They're obviously taking more of a kind of Vincent D'Onofrio approach on the character, which I think is a good call because Fat Kingpin is kind of cool, but also not very realistic and doesn't really fit with the tone of the game very well. The third image we see here is Mr. Negative fighting Spider-Man on a New York subway. This is intriguing from a story perspective because if you recall from the end of the last trailer, Mr. Negative touched Spider-Man and we were all kind of thinking, hey, maybe this made him go to the dark side. Here he is touching Spider-Man again in a totally different setting, so maybe it's possible that Spider-Man doesn't go evil or find some kind of a cure for it to resist it or something. Maybe this is pretty late in the game, as opposed to the trailer, which is presumably a bit earlier. I don't know, I'm just sort of guessing here. But let's go ahead and look around that subway car. To the left, you can see someone reading the Daily Bugle, and you can see the slogan from the game of the Daily Bugle, which apparently is, "We always give you more." This is consistent with footage that we saw from the E3 trailer. Then if you look up top toward the middle, you can see an actual Daily Bugle ad with that slogan, followed by some sort of maybe a perfume ad or something. And then there's an ad that echoes a billboard that we saw in the last trailer. My wife's a native New Yorker, and she says it better than I do.
Forget about it.
I looked for Easter eggs here, and they're kind of hard to come by. Does 1444 mean something? I don't think so. What about 83 on the seat? Probably not. And what about this graffiti? Does that say Banner, maybe? Like Bruce? Probably not. I'm grasping at straws here. But hello, what's this? Anyone else suddenly compelled to paint the town red? So that brings us to Peter's room. Not the first time we've seen Peter's room in a video game, but definitely the most detailed if this concept art is to be any indication. That is one messy room. First of all, I'm actually kind of dying to know what's on all of those post-it notes. This is just a little too low resolution to make anything out. Except now for the ones to the right, which Insomniac released through a bigger image that came through their Twitter than what is actually in the trailer. So let's take a look at those. Starting from the top, we've got Tony's Pizza and Job Interview. Tony's Pizza, there's an actual box in the room. Then to the right of that, we've got Need More Something. Below that, rent past due again, Peter. Somebody is actually leaving these notes for him, visiting him in his apartment. Then to the left, it says something about laundry, then picking up Aunt May at like 5 p.m. or something, and I presume that's a place that's written underneath it. And there are actually a couple more here that I've cropped out for the time being, but we'll get back to them, don't worry. Over on Peter's corkboard, we see a bunch of Daily Bugle headlines. First of all, it struck me that the Daily Bugle logo here is actually the one that I'm almost positive originated from the Sam Raimi movies and has since crept its way into the comics every so often. But it's also apparently different than the Daily Bugle logo we saw in the other piece of concept art, so hopefully they get that consistent along the way. The headlines here are real teases. One clearly says cop, and what comes after it, I don't know, killed, killer maybe something completely different, we just don't know. If it's meant to say cop killer, it could actually be a reference to the Sin Eater who killed Spider-Man's friend on the police department, Gene DeWolf. And then another says Brooklyn bomb kills somebody's pal, apparently. If that's some kind of a reference, I'm not really sure what it would be. Maybe the bomb was a pumpkin bomb? Again, really stretching here. I like that there's a pad and paper with a bunch of spider designs next to his bed. Do we see the same design that's on his actual suit now? You decide. Of course, there's a ton of tools here, and just the fact that this has been thought about says a lot about the way Insomniac is treating the character. Peter's a scientist who likes to tinker with things. Of course he's going to have a bunch of tools lying around. But let's check out the left-hand side of this image, shall we? First of all, up top, we see a lot of pictures. Peter Parker loves taking pictures. Not Polaroid pictures typically, but hey, we'll go with it. At this resolution, it's impossible to make out who any of the actual characters are in the pictures, but one of them does appear to be a female smiling next to who we can assume to be Peter. Could not be. Could that be MJ? Well, here's a pretty good clue. Yeah, check out that key next to the overdue rent notice. It says MJ on the keychain. Just like the post-it note I didn't show you actually says, call MJ. Don't forget, I dare you. So that says to me that MJ has a key, or maybe that's Peter's key to MJ's apartment, or maybe MJ had a key and she's not his girlfriend anymore and Peter just hasn't taken the keychain off of it yet. But Mary Jane Watson apparently is a part of this game, and this is the most firm confirmation that we've had so far, other than possibly maybe that billboard that may or may not be her. Face it, Tiger, I just hit the jackpot. Guys, this was a blast to put together, and I certainly have some other Spider-Man PS4 ideas that I can put to video. Also a little bit of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. So please hit the subscribe button, check out the other links you see here, and I'll see you next time. Bye everybody.